So in the first couple of videos of this series, you see me tear out my old layout, modify the bench work, and then kind of do all the foundational stuff to get ready to rebuild with a bigger, better version 2.0. So I've got a lot of progress made, so I'm going to show you what I've been up to. Okay, so down on the lower level, coming out of the helix, you can see where my track's at. I've got a dark line. That'll be the center line of the main line. You can see that. And you can see a couple other lines here for the passing, siding, and turnout for a yard area. The lighter lines here are where turnouts go. So you can see this is kind of the yard area here. But I've got all the track plan kind of marked down through this section. So now I'm going to install some cork road bed. Okay guys, so I got a couple different products I'm going to use for the cork road bed. This is actual HO scale cork road bed from Midwest Products. I picked this up at the local model railroad hobby shop, and it comes in these strips. You break it down the middle. It has a little bit of a taper. When you put it together, when you glue it down, you put the taper to the outside, and it gives you your edges for your ballast. You can hit this with a sanding sponge and knock those off before you ballast it. So I'll use that along the main line. That way my main line will set up a little bit higher, prototypically. And then in the yard areas, I've got this sheet cork that I'll use. And I'll just cut it down to the dimensions that I need for the yard areas. And I'll glue a section of this down. So I was able to reuse maybe 25-30% of the old cork road bed from the old layout. And I got that all glued in. I just used the center line that I had marked and then just glued it and used some T-pins. Once that dried, I took some sandpaper. I think this is like 80 grit sandpaper, and just went through and knocked off those edges up at the top so that I wouldn't have those problems with that sticking out once I got to the point of putting ballast down. I'll show you a section here where I do some sheet cork. Okay, so I've got my cork road bed down for the branch line that goes out to Othello. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set this aside, but I'm going to put some cork, some sheet cork down for this grain elevator siding that's going to go here at Scholmer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure out what I need, and then I'll cut it to the dimensions I need, and then I'll just put some Elmer's glue on the back side of it, stick it down, put some weight on it, and let it set. So here's just a quick overview. This is when I had most of the cork road bed and sheet cork down and installed. Again, I'm just working on the lower level right now. So I've got most of it installed. So I'm kind of proud of myself, and I'm going to move on to installing track at this point. So I apologize. I forgot to take any sort of video when I was putting track down. I was pretty busy. But anyways, I've got most of the track down on the lower level. I got a few sidings still to figure out, but I'm tied in at the helix, and I've got my branch line out to Othello. I've got 90% of the track down on the lower level at this point. So next step was drilling holes and installing the feeder wires for the electrical. I installed about 12 sets of feeder wires. I soldered all of my rail connections. I was able to run trains later that day. I didn't have any problems, so this worked out great. While I was working on the electrical, I went ahead and installed my control point for my NCE power cab system right in the fascia. Now that I was done with all the soldering on the rails, you can see it really sticks out like a sore thumb. I got out the airbrush and I used the rust color, and I just started putting some color to the rails, making sure that I covered up all of those soldered connections, and it made a pretty big difference. So with all the track installation work, soldering, painting completed, I started work on putting down ballast. This is pretty boring, but I just thought I'd show a little bit of it. Just using my finger and a couple of paint brushes, and then soaking it with isopropyl alcohol. And then I used about a 60-40 mix of hot water to white glue to secure it all in place, let it set overnight. I put a fan on it so it dries a little bit faster, but it's a slow process. I just work on it in small sections and kind of skip around. So here's a couple sections of ballast that I completed. I'm just doing small sections and skipping around so I don't get burned out. This is what I do filling in between other projects. Here you can see I got the ground throws installed on the lower deck. There's 17 of them. That worked out pretty cool. And I painted the handles on them orange. It just adds a little bit more detail. So I'll keep plugging away with putting down ballast and trying to hammer out what I want to do for industries here. I have a pretty good idea. I originally was thinking 4. I'm thinking now maybe doing 3, or maybe even just 2 in a repair facility over by the yard. I'm going to try to keep a minimalistic approach just so the railroad feels a little bit larger and there's gaps between industries that I just fill with scenery. So I'm going to keep plugging away on that. Thanks for watching, guys. Happy railroading.